Alrighty, well, hello and welcome to Self Roles and Expectations. My name is Chuck Hall, and I'm going to walk through this model that I've been using for about the past 15 years or so. And I've found it very helpful, as have various clients of mine in my work with them. All right, so the methodology that I use here, I learned from a professor in my graduate program, Organizational Dynamics at the University of Pennsylvania. Jim Larkin was an amazing man, passed away too young in his early 70s, but he taught this course, Self Roles and Expectations. And what was really interesting is for a large university graduate school, we didn't have any textbook for the class. We had film, we had biographies, and we all told our personal stories in the class to help us all learn from each other. One saying that I absolutely love is the best measure of a true leader is if they matter when they are not there. And I would say that what Jim taught me and hundreds of other folks during his career, probably thousands of folks if I think about it, really is a testimony to him. So he did pass away in 2013, but those of us who studied with him continue to benefit and share with what he taught us. So our agenda today, we're going to talk about, I'm going to give you a little bit of context for this construct of self roles and expectations. Then we're going to talk about the evolving self, our roles and expectations in general. Then we're going to walk through the actual framework of understanding ourself, listing out our roles, and then mapping expectations. So I'm going to jump in and get started with some examples. The first one is one we used in the class. Then a couple of others are ones that I've been thinking about. Um, so this is a character, the main character from the movie Dances with Wolves, played by Kevin Costner. And this was one of the central things that we discussed in our class that was really profound. I had watched this movie and loved it, but after talking about it in class, I went back and watched it, and I've watched it several times since. What happens with this fictional character is he was a Union cavalry officer in the US Civil War. And he was so dedicated to the war and to the government and to his troops that he actually attempted to sacrifice his life to inspire his troops, which he did. And so, as a reward for his heroism, or you could say foolishness, depending on your perspective, the government gave him an opportunity to get any post he wanted. And he asked to go to a remote outpost on the western frontier where there was hardly anybody there. When he got there, he found that there were no soldiers, no officers left, and he got dropped off and left on his own. The government forgot about him and left him there. And over time, he left from the eastern part of the US to the Western Territory, had no other people around for a while. Then he started to engage with the indigenous people. And when soldiers eventually came back, they attacked him, put him in shackles, and accused him of desertion and all kinds of things. And he ended up spending the rest of his life, he got freed, spent the rest of his life living with the Native Americans and actually fighting against the government. And so what we saw is he went from a heroic soldier in the US Army to kind of a renegade who was more in touch with himself. And that was a really interesting lesson to think about the way your life can change. The next example is a real life person, and this is Ellen DeGeneres. So she started out as like a young, somewhat unknown comedian, and she ended up really becoming a star. She ended up coming out and being an outspoken person for LGBTQ issues, and really kind of became a celebrity in the US, very popular, but her life evolved. And now that she's kind of in the latter half of her life, she is a popular spokesperson in advertising, well recognized character. And I apologize for the quality of this image, but I think most of us, if not all of us, know who Ellen DeGeneres is. The next character is a fictional character, but one of my favorite studies in the way people can evolve, and maybe not necessarily for the good. So this is from the series Breaking Bad, and so Walter White was a high school chemistry teacher who developed cancer, and he couldn't afford his care. So he started, because he was good at chemistry, he started manufacturing and selling drugs, and ultimately he became this really horrible, hardened drug kingpin who didn't care about anybody. And so as we walk through this, our model today, I would say he actually went in a very negative, deteriorating um, version of himself, based on largely his values, but also how he chose to respond to situations. So let's go through self roles and expectations in life stages. And we're all adults here. So we're going to spend most of our time focusing on adulthood, but it's important to understand where we came from. So all of us started out more or less as a blank canvas, as new human beings in this world. And so when we first started out, early childhood, who were we? So babies are self-absorbed. They just have their own little world. It's very small. And babies really don't just construct their own identity or their own self. Everything that they learn and experience usually comes through parents and caregivers. So, beliefs about our worth, safety, trust, all of those come to us at the start of our lives. And so, this emotional substructure really sticks with us throughout life, and unless or until we work to actively change it. So in early childhood, kids usually don't get to choose the roles. They don't go out and get jobs. They don't choose to be in a play group or whatever. Their parents or caregivers give them the roles. And we often get titles assigned to us like, oh, you're the smart one, or you're a quiet one, or you're really responsible. So the roles that we get cast into often are given to us by our family. Birth order definitely affects this, and who our caregivers are. Um, and these roles end up being shaped by how other people see us, and ultimately determine how we see ourselves as young children. So the expectations um, that we have often come from our family, our religion, our culture, and so we get this idea of what the good life is as children, and we often don't get any say in that. It's the adults around us who determine that. Um, and so we just kind of take all of this in. We don't really think about it. And what I find in my work, and I think a lot of us, if we think about it, a lot of people still cling to their original family values, religion, cultural identity, which isn't necessarily bad, but it's just something that stays with us for life. So now we skip ahead a little bit and we get to adolescence, which is a big time of change. So as far as self is concerned, we start to think about who we are. Adolescents are often known for rebellion, rejecting parents, aligning more with their peer group, kind of trying things out, and starting to be more involved in who we are, who is our real self. And so we start to think about our identity. We'll see kids will want to change their hairstyle or their clothes or the way they interact with people, attitudes that surface. which may be positive or may be somewhat negative. And so we start to try different roles that we get to choose ourselves, athlete, artist, outsider, leader. And some roles feel like they fit with us, and others feel like they're not necessarily what we want to do. We've just inherited them, or we feel like we can't escape. Some of our roles stick with us and they can be chosen or not, but they can affect how we see ourselves for decades to come. So then we go expectations. So this is really where the friction comes out. So we can have expectations for ourselves, and others can have expectations for us. And that can cause real friction in the lives of young adults. We often, and maybe we experienced this when we were at this the latter part of this, going off to college, complete rebellion against parents' values, religion, etc. Um, and so there can be a gap between what our expectations are and what the expectations were for us in the previous roles in our life. So now that we're all adults, we are not finished works. In fact, I do some teaching for seniors who range in age from about 60, and the oldest person in the class that I teach is 94. And what I see is that we all continue to evolve as we are adults. And so, it's kind of like we never arrive. We continue to think about who we are, the roles we play, and what the expectations are for us. So let's talk about how we get to know ourselves better. So here are some distinct set steps. And by the way, I will share with everybody the slides from today as well as a worksheet. So I should have said that before so you didn't feel like you had to take a lot of notes. But here are some steps that I recommend to get to know yourself. So define your values. I'll share something about more on values in a minute. But a lot of times what I have done is I have written down my values, and I've done this exercise. Haven't done it in about 2 years now, but I'm getting ready to do it again. But I do it continuously, and I did it year in and year out for probably a good 20, not 20 years, 10 to 15 years, just by writing down, these are the things that I think my values are. And then if you want to be bold, you can really think about what your friends and family say about your values. You might even ask them proactively, what do you think my values are? If you have a boss or supervisor, you can think about what they say, and performance reviews can be really revealing, because it's almost like a supervisor is required to tell you what they think about your performance, and you can intuit. They don't say outright what they think about you, but if they say things like always reliable, I can count on them to get the job done, has great ideas, things like that, that starts to do that. This next one can be the hardest one, is what do you say about yourself? So all of us have self-talk, and sometimes when things aren't going well, we might say things like, oh, you're really stupid, or I can't believe you made that mistake, or, why don't you have more energy? Why aren't you more successful? On the flip side, you might take the time and say, wow, I think I did a really good job on that project, or I have some good ideas, or I'm a good artist, I'm really creative. And so we have to think about our self-talk. So there are some ways that we can get kind of an outside perspective to assess ourselves. And so that fits into the category of self-assessment. There is a free version of this at value.es, which is an online website. And basically what you do is you answer some questions, and it gives you picks from this inventory of qualities or things that you might value. And it gives you, and again, I'm not encouraging you to buy reports. I've had clients who have purchased this report, but I never have. I've just done the free version, and it gives me insights into, based on the way I answer questions, what it says about my values. And I found that to be very helpful. The next item is something that a lot of companies use, and it is called Best Work. And basically, what this does is it helps you get a perspective on your work, what you bring to your work, which you can infer from that some of the things like about you. And so this is something that companies normally pay for people to do. I have licensed this, and if anybody on this call, if you've not done Best Work previously and you would like to, I will be happy to send you the link to that. You just have to request it. But this is like overall strengths, and all this report does is just tell you things that you do well, and that are real strengths for you. And this is just a snapshot of the overall report. The overall report wouldn't be readable on screen. And then this is a chart of different qualities that you can see that this is called the Executive Strengths Inventory, and it's not just for executives. It's called that, but it's actually a really good thing for pretty much everybody to look at, so you can see objectively what your strengths are when it comes to your work or career. And for most of us, a lot of our identity comes out of the work that we do. It's just a function of our society where we seem to get valued for what we do, even more than who we are. So the next part, which is our roles, is that it's really essential to list and map our roles. And so some of the ways that we can think about our roles, and I'll show you in a moment some that I've mapped for myself, or that I've listed for myself, are, come within our family. They can come within our jobs. They can come within our community, or they can just be, completely informal. These are some of my roles as an example. So I have the roles on the left and the roles on the right. I started with the things that are most important to me, and then just kind of free-formed after that. But my family is absolutely the most important roles that I have. And then over on the right are some of the things that are roles that I have, but my family tends to be my priority. So roles come with expectations. So for every role that we have, we either have an expectation for ourselves, or or other people give us expectations. So what is an expectation? It is a belief, conscious or inherited, about what someone should do, should be, or should deliver in a given role. So, as a parent, when my kids were little, there was an expectation that I had, society had, my spouse had, my children have, that I would take care of them, keep them safe, provide for them, etc. And so that was absolutely a conscious role. It was a decision that I made, and something that I gladly accepted. So expectations can come from others, or they can come from yourself, or just from standards that you have actively chosen. So let's say, for instance, you read a job description in a job posting, you see what the expectations are for that job. Those are the standards that the company has set. And by agreeing to the job, you agree to take on those expectations. And anybody who's ever had a performance review knows that it's often said, meets expectations, exceeds expectations, does not meet expectations. And so that comes along with that role. So expectations can happen whether they're spoken aloud, or whether they just kind of shape our behavior or our judgment, or our self-worth. Sometimes we don't even recognize what expectations are for us until we stop to really think about it. And one of the things that I find in organizations that people run into is that oftentimes in a group of people, somebody will be the person who informally gets the team back on track or comes up with a good idea or improves morale. And that might not be in our job description, but it's just become an informal expectation for what everybody thinks we should be doing. So this is a little chart, and this is a worksheet that I will send out. It's a fillable PDF, and you can put in as many roles as you want. There are just 5 on each page, but you can just copy this over and over or print it out over and over, and think about your role. I just put expectation 1, 2, and 3. There may be for a role, there might be 10 expectations, but this at least is a discussion starter. So what you can do is you can put the role in the first column and then think about an expectation, whether it's from somebody else or it's from yourself, and go ahead and fill this in. You can also just take a tablet and write down role and expectations. Sometimes I've kind of done this where it's almost like a thought cloud, where I'll put a role on a blank sheet of paper and then I'll just like draw lines, and then it can even be helpful to write down who expects that of me in my role. Now, one of the things as you go through this, you might decide that expectations are realistic or unrealistic, whether they're your expectation or someone else's. But that's the whole point of first getting these down and then being able to examine them. So after you get them all down, it's this process of then what? So this is a recursive exercise, and I took Jim Larkin's class in 2008, and I looked at this process sometimes every day, but generally at least a week or every other week for more than 8 years. And I just really continued to focus on this. So if you go back to the self part, think about who am I? And think about the roles that you have and the expectations. And you can just continue to do this, not necessarily in an obsessive way, but if you have an obsessive personality, that could happen. But really more from oh, what am I learning as I'm living life? How do I adapt this? And how do I keep changing? Roles is really important because what I found was there were roles that I no longer wanted to have, or roles where I wanted to change the expectations over time. So here are some questions that you can ask yourself. So once you kind of examine yourself and your values and think about who you are, do you like the self you are? Are you the self that you want to be? What would you change? What parts of yourself would you like to bring forward or emphasize more? And then with your roles, do you like the roles that you have? Do you want to shed some of them? Like, is there a role in your community? I have a role right now in my community that I'm not sure that I want to keep because of what some of the expectations are for me and how that can interfere with other commitments. Um, there's not necessarily kind of a conflict with my values of who I am in that role, but it's really a matter of do I want to invest the time in that role? Can somebody else take on that role? Would they be happier in the role? Would they do better? And then if you feel pulled in too many directions, do you have too many roles? Do you need to pare it down? One of the things, and I don't know if anybody's familiar with Marie Kondo, if it doesn't bring you joy, get rid of it. And sometimes we have roles, particularly in volunteer organizations or small part-time jobs or service with a client that really isn't going well. So what roles can you move on for if you have too many? And then expectations. The first question that I like to ask is, are you comfortable with others' expectations of you? Are they realistic? Um, I have a longtime friend who I don't keep in touch with too often anymore, maybe just talk a couple of times a year. But what I found was that his expectations were that I had to be a sounding board for all of his problems. And anytime I talked to him, he only wanted to talk about his issues. And it didn't really seem like he cared about our friendship or me as much as I was almost like providing a free venting service for him. So I was not comfortable with those expectations. I tried to express it to him, but it just really didn't work. And so I kind of pulled back on our friendship and changed his expectations of me because I just didn't make myself available. So when you are uncomfortable with the expectations, you can change them. You can pull out of a role completely, and poof, the expectations are gone. One of the most important things, however, is, are you comfortable with your expectations of yourself? And sometimes I have had too high expectations for myself, and I will say I'm very happy I had a therapist who helped me be less hard on myself. One of the things that I was doing was being too hard on myself if I did not meet my self-care goals with enough meditation, enough relaxation time, enough reflection, etc. And it turned out I was creating unrealistic expectations for myself. And then I realized that I needed to change those expectations, which we can do all the time. Sometimes expectations from others can seem unreasonable or too heavy to bear. Um, and this can happen sometimes if you are in a helping profession or you're a helping person. Sometimes people may want you to be, for instance, like their mental health anchor. And so you may need to encourage them to seek professional guidance because, like I've just said to people, look, I'm not really qualified to work through this issue with you. I can be a supportive friend, but I cannot replace what a psychologist or therapist or psychiatrist could do to help you. So these are my closing thoughts. This is your life. So even if you were born with roles and expectations and an identity of yourself, you are an adult now and you are free to choose what you want. And so this starts with really reflecting on yourself, roles, and expectations. You can talk to people you value, whether that's a family member or a friend or a professional like a therapist or a coach or a mentor or somebody who can give you some insights. And you may decide that you want to add, subtract, revise things about yourself, your roles, and the expectations. But ultimately, this is your life, and you are the one who gets to choose. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording now. Before I do that, I will say I always am happy to have conversations with people individually about this. So whether you are participating live or you are watching this as a replay, feel free to reach out to me if you would like to discuss this further. So let me stop the recording, and then I will, where is the stop recording? Stop recording.